Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first meeting of the new year, January the 7th, City Council meeting. I now call this meeting to order. At this time, I'm on Councilwoman Coonrod is not with us any longer. If you would stand, let's pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilwoman Coonrod, would you like to lead us in invocation? You want to hit your line?
Heavenly Father, we come before you today with grateful hearts, just thankful for the opportunity to gather and serve our community. We ask for your guidance today in this meeting as we discuss matters that affect lives of so many. May our decisions be thoughtful and just, bringing hope and progress to our community. Father, we know there are challenges ahead, broken systems, unmet needs, and hearts that are hurting. But we trust in your power to bring restoration and renewal. Guide us to be instruments of change, working together to build a city where every person can thrive, where no one is forgotten, and where love and unity prevail. We ask all this in your holy and powerful name. Amen.
Amen. We have no special presentations this afternoon. Could I have motion on the minutes? All right, with no objections, the minutes will stand as recorded. Before we move into our discussion of the agenda, there is a couple of items that I need to take care of. One, I would like to appoint Councilman Smith to be the chair of our Budget and Finance Committee. Councilman Smith, if you don't mind taking over that, please, and request at the same time that we schedule a Budget and Finance Committee meeting for next Tuesday, January the 14th. Thank you. Also, during our 2 o'clock strategic planning meeting, we did talk about filling the District 6 seat. We came up with the following proposed timeline. We will send a notice to the newspaper on January the 8th that we'll be accepting resumes and letters of interest from anyone that would like to fill this vacancy until April of the swearing in. We will take resumes and letters from January the 8th through January the 21st at noon. So anyone interested in just filling the seat until the swearing in, until right after the election, you have from January the 8th to January the 21st at noon to submit your application or your resume. January the 14th, we will, Mr. Attorney will have a resolution for us to consider to declare the seat vacant. And then on January the 28th, we will begin interviews of all of those who have submitted resumes and letters. We'll begin interviews at 3:30 during our regular business meeting, and then we will have a vote after the recess on January the 28th, and then whoever receives the majority vote will have the swearing in under other business. So, Council, any questions or concerns, comments about anything on our proposed timeline? Very well. As we move into our discussion of this week's agenda, we have a pretty lengthy agenda since we have been off for the past 2 weeks. No ordinances on final reading. Under ordinances first reading, we do have our council office ordinance amending the city code relative to threats or mass violence on city-owned property. Any questions or comments on this ordinance? Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you. The legal team has been working on a question that I have with this ordinance language, and I'm going to pull the, I don't have a copy of the most recent one, from 255. What does the language currently read in the section that I'm concerned about? Phil?
The sections that we have here, currently, we've made revisions to section C1B. And I guess the concern is the original provisions of section C1B talk about anybody that has knowledge of a threat of mass violence on city-owned property or to city property shall report the threat immediately to the local law enforcement agency with jurisdiction. We have added and changed the language from the community center, because that would only be referencing community centers, to the mayor or designated department head of the city property that is subject to the threat of mass violence. I think there's some question about whether just the adoption of this ordinance should have something about 911 immediately in connection with this, and we can make that change if that's what you'd prefer.
Okay. So Councilwoman Coonrod, when I brought up concerns about this, it was a meeting you weren't able to be here for. So because this is your ordinance that you have brought before the council for consideration, and thank you for bringing it. My concern about section C1B is that even as the language has evolved, that if someone were to hear of a threat of mass violence to, well, we'll say City Hall, the way that this is reading, you're supposed to pick up the phone and call the mayor along with the police officer. Or if it was a threat of mass violence against the wastewater treatment plant, you're supposed to find Mark Heinzer and call him. And I don't feel like that's a reasonable expectation for a general member of the public. And I question if it's practical from the city side. But I know that in the beginning, the ordinance was written specifically focused on community centers. And so I think this is residual from that first writing of the ordinance, where you need to call 911 and you need to go tell that community center if something's wrong. So I would be more than happy to have a separate section, like C, that says if it is a community center, you need to alert the community center. But I would prefer it, I think, if otherwise, we would have some type of language that allows section A to stand alone and say, you need to call, if you find out there's potential for mass violence, you need to call the police, period. So that's where I'm at on that. And legal hasn't found a solution that I feel like really answers the question yet, but I'd love your thoughts on that.
Chair.
Councilwoman?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because if you don't, who's going to be calling the mayor? The mayor could be anywhere in the United States at the time of act of violence happening. But yes, it will be appropriate. Call 911, send an email if you can, communicate it to somebody within the area that you know about this act of mass violence, because if it's you see it, you witness it, you need to communicate right then. You may not have time to wait on a phone call from the council person to respond back to you. Like, you need immediate action then. Mm-hmm. So that first nearest person that can help you, like, I would think that's what the ordinance should be communicating. And if 911 is a direct call, that we could just add that on there. It shouldn't be problematic to do.
Okay, I mean, that's our one system, that there's always going to be somebody that will answer and can connect to the appropriate emergency folks. So if you're comfortable with that, I'd love to see B just be struck completely and just be
Local law enforcement agency and 911 with jurisdiction in the city, period.
I mean, I think.
Yeah, within the city, like, we should be
So,
calling
I mean, this
East
becomes a
Ridge.
legal document, right? So what I don't want to set us up for is, I hear a threat of mass violence and now I have a civil suit against me because I didn't call two numbers. I only called 911.
Okay.
Right? So a threat of mass violence is an emergency, right?
Yep.
So I'd say we say call 911.
Okay.
Is there a reason why you wouldn't?
Well, I mean, some people may call directly to the police department on their 698-9500. It's just that number, but the 911 number is just 911.
Would it be just
Yeah, just contact the police. It don't have to
notify
be.
emergency personnel?
Yeah, it could be notify emergency
that's fine.
personnel. It could be,
Okay,
some
notify
people may not
emergency
feel
personnel.
comfortable with calling the police.
That way
We're
you don't
still
have-
in that era. So if it's whoever they want to call emergency response, call emergency response. If you want to go home and you want to tell your parent who can communicate to the people appropriate authority.
But that's not
that
what
needs
this
to be
ordinance
done.
says, though. This ordinance doesn't allow you to go home and tell your parent or go home and do that. Like, it's saying, we want to know immediately. If you hear something, we need you to tell us immediately, and under penalty
me,
of law. So, like,
So how I would interpret that, if something happened, Peyton witnessed something, she may not feel immediate to her is, I done went and told an authority figure. That authority figure could be a parent. It could be a police. If she don't feel comfortable with a police officer, that kid is gonna go tell the nearest person who will act immediately to report it. But I can see how you could read it differently too. People can interpret it different things. For many of our community members, we just gotta be honest. They're not gonna feel safe going to the police officer. It is an option. Yes, we can add it in the ordinance. If you feel comfortable with calling emergency response, do that. If you're at a community center, communicate it to somebody of authority, somebody who can help you get the message to that there's a threat of mass violence. But it shouldn't have to be directly linked to, we're gonna call the mayor. Community members don't have his direct contact number. That shouldn't be in there, but whoever an appropriate authority figure, that will be who you will reach out to.
well, I think what I'm seeking here is clarity, because clarity of instruction of what is expected of an individual when they hear a threat of mass violence. And what I'm hearing you describe adds a vagueness to it that I would not be comfortable with, because what we're saying is that if someone hears something, then they need to do fill in the blank, or there will be civil penalties, you will pay restitution, you can have your license revoked. Like, there are some severe penalties here that we're telling people they need to fill in the blank for. So, and what I saw with the state ordinance like this, we saw an uneven implementation, and we just need to be prepared to do what we mean to do, to start as we mean to go on. And what you're saying makes perfect sense to me. If a child hears it, and you originally were thinking of it from a community center perspective, if a child hears it, they may not call 911, they may tell their teacher. So I question, is this ready to be voted on?
It's ready. We've had months of preparing for it.
But we don't have an answer on what you're supposed to do when you hear mass violence.
Well, that's why we're talking about it. So when it comes, the separate with community centers, and if we're talking about all the other city buildings, like now we're talking about, we're dealing with adults or people that enter in that space. So you're gonna expect for them to, one, call 911. If we got a panic button, they can hit the panic button. If they have, you can communicate to whoever the people that's in authority at that moment, or call 911. Jenny, is not a hard fix. We could just put it in the ordinance. It's not something that should be held up because you don't agree with it, well, we can fix it. Is all that I'm saying. We can add, if calling 911 is your pet peeve, let's add it into the ordinance. Call 911, the emergency number or the non-emergency number, 423-698-2525. Either one works. If you want to add the email, we could do that too.
I don't want to add email.
Okay, so
I
our
want
ways of
clarity.
communicating to it.
I want clarity, I want simplicity of instructions for the public.
Right, so let's add, she want to add call 911, call 911.
Well, notify emergency personnel.
Yeah, that's simple.
That way,
I'm comfortable with notify emergency personnel. And what about B?
just take it out.
Take it out. Okay. If you're comfortable with that, Councilwoman Conrad, I'm comfortable with that.
Mr. Attorney, could you give us an alternate version? I know we've got version 5, but just give us an alternate version for tonight.
Yes, and it would just simply state that in C1, any person who has knowledge of a threat of mass violence on city-owned property or to city property-related activity shall report the threat immediately to notify emergency personnel with jurisdiction in the city.
Sounds good to me. Clear.
Councilwoman Noel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had made a request for the community center managers to have a meeting of all of them in reference to this. Was that meeting done?
Okay,
I couldn't even hear you. What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Ms. Hunter, you want to come to the microphone, please?
Good afternoon. We did have the meeting.
With all the community center managers.
We had it with the community center directors, and what we did with the community center managers was we implemented some more training around the mass violence. So we did the training for CRAZE that was done by our HR department with James. And then we also had meetings with the Hamilton County School Department officials that handle their mass violence trainings and things like that. So we went outside to get additional resources so that we could look at what's happening with best practices before we have all of our community centers come in together when we don't have all of the complete answers from the resources that we're looking for, but we did do additional training. And all of our community centers know to call 911 if there's any mass violence.
Okay, so I don't think that was my question. I know they all know to call 911. My request was for all of the community center managers, for you all to pull all of them together and have a meeting with them, not the directors, but the managers themselves. Because they are actually the first ones, they're right there. If anything happens,
Yes.
they are the one that would have to deal with whatever.
So we did we have a community center cabinet meeting with all of our directors. So we did in that particular meeting address the issues around mass violence, which led to us having the additional training. So we did have that discussion in our cabinet meeting that we have biweekly with our center managers.
Okay, so once again, I'm going to make the request to pull all community center managers together.
Yes.
Pull all of them together.
Are you calling the directors managers?
Well, hold on,
Yes, our
let's make sure
managers.
let's stay in order here. Councilwoman Knowles, are you good there?
No, I'm not.
Well,
I'm
I
not
mean,
good yet. I mean,
have you got your questions or statements made?
yes, my statement is made. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Dotley?
Yeah, so, Ms. Hunter, so are there any, now I was out for the majority of this discussion, so I'm catching up on everything. So are there any current internal policies that address this issue?
Yes, we do have our community center policies that address the issues of what to do when there is a situation that occurs inside of our community centers. So we do have internal policies.
Okay, thank you so much. And Mr. Chair, just so you're aware, I do plan to abstain from this particular vote this evening.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Coonrod?
Thank you, Chair. So, Ms. Carso, I'm clear on the names of what we call them. So I know Councilwoman Noel was saying for the directors, but are you calling, because when we think about the directors, I think about Chris and Ty. Now, are you calling them directors, or are they still just considered managers?
The center managers were also informed, so we had a meeting with the directors, and we've also had at our cabinet meeting that we have with all of our community center managers, that includes our directors, we've had the discussion.
Okay, but then I know another couple of requests that was made because Chip and I and several others were concerned about making sure that our employees were protected around the mass violence. Here is that, because we've already lost a couple of employees who intervened and they lost their job. So that, I know the HR was working on something around with the EIG that may take a little while longer. I just want to make sure that's still in the works, that if something happens, because I mentioned prior to us going on our break, is that there was an incident that happened at Brainerd And a lot of the stuff flow over from schools. They're having fights in schools. Then they come into the community centers, and then they call and saying, okay, we need the police to come and respond. But somebody done got stomped in the head. They just standing here watching. So we need to make sure that we're continuing to, push to make sure that we have safeguards with our employees, that if they do intervene, they're not gonna lose their jobs. Because they actually intervening and helping to save a life. But back to the ordinance portion of it is that since it bringing the ordinance forth, we've had several, and it don't go reported a lot of times, or the news not picking it up, or people not calling the police about it, or the police come taking their time, or whatever the case may be. But our community centers that are in the majority black communities, they have problems or issues with people coming and resulting in retaliatory actions on the city grounds. And we talked about that, and it's very concerning. And if there is nothing in place to say, even just so recently at Carver Center with a kid pulling out a gun, just so happened that somebody who had trained was able to recognize what was going on and was able to intervene. But it's those kind of actions that we're trying to prevent. Will we stop every action or act of violence that's going to happen? No, we won't. But we will be able to catch and reduce them for our community centers, and particularly in our areas. We have to have something in place. We have to, I know some people may, and I've had conversations around it, is that people are like, well, why are we being so harsh on our kids? Because, with their mind frames, they're not going to really act on it. But who's to say that they're not going to act on that? Because we've had, not just in the inner city community, but in the suburban community, the kids making these statements, actually showing up at schools with guns, actually making these statements in our community centers, and actually showing up at our community centers with guns, deploying gunfire, ready for retaliatory action. And we're saying, oh, well, I can't believe this 9-year-old actually acted upon it, or going to get their family members, and family members come, and then it explodes to something else. So we do need something to be in place. We did talk about it being more punitive. Well, we know that we can't just continue to give slap in this era. I'll just say, we can't continue to just give a slap on the hand and say, oh, little boo-boo didn't mean it. Yes, they did. Their actions and words, they have consequences behind it, and our parents have to be more accountable to it. So if it's gonna say that, but it's time being you're suspended from this center, then yes, you're gonna be suspended from the center, or whatever the actions is therefore. And if you wanna go to the juvenile to get back into the center, or whatever the actions that the ordinance is dictating, but we have to have something in place for people to know in the community that we're not gonna continue to deal with this behavior. And I know Councilwoman Burrs, when she was here, she did raise some key questions too that I'm sure that you all are still working on and trying to address as well. But ultimately, safeguards in place for our employers will be the next thing from this ordinance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hunter.
Thank you.
All right, moving into public works and wastewater. I think Councilwoman Hill, I'm sorry, Councilwoman No, I missed your lot.
I am still not satisfied. I requested that a meeting of the community center managers be had, not in a session with someone else. I requested that to be done, and I am still waiting for that to be done.
Councilwoman knows we have a community center cabinet meeting on Monday, and that is a meeting of all of our community center managers, and we will address the issues again at that meeting. Because at that meeting, that's our time to bring all of the managers together, and so on the agenda, that will be on the agenda at our Monday meeting.
Okay, so council family, I have made myself clear, right?
Well, I think-
Is there any questions as to what I am asking?
So I think the question is, we want policy built around what actions the community center managers can take whenever they see an act of violence that will protect them from retribution. That's basically your question, correct?
Well, my question is, if this, the policy here, the ordinance here, my request was to have a meeting with all the community center managers because they are the first ones that are there. They have to have something in place. And who better to tell us what they need in place other than the community center managers themselves?
What we have in place right now is if there's any acts of violence, they call 911. That is the first thing that we do. And also, even if there's a fight that breaks out and it requires intervention, we call the police, we write a report, we submit that report in, and whoever's involved in that altercation is also suspended from the center for a period of time. So we already have that in place.
So let me, and the Mr. Attorney just pointed this out, in the ordinance, one of the items does say, city departments shall develop policies and procedures to report and resolve violence and credible threats to employee safety on city-owned properties. So it does specifically point out that policies will be developed as a result of this ordinance around what the community managers, what actions they can take and need to take.
Okay, so my issue is,
They have to report back here annually too.
Yeah, and they report back annually for policy updates.
oh God, geez. Okay.
You good? I mean, well,
Well.
I know you're not, I know you probably still got some burning.
Yes,
Councilwoman Knoll,
yes, Chief Freeman,
I hear your frustration.
yes.
We will have a meeting with the community center managers.
Thank you.
ASAP.
That's all I'm asking.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is that so difficult? And why did it take you to come to this podium to say that?
We will get it taken care of. We will get it handled.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, we ready to move on?
I am.
Okay, thank you. Moving into Public Works, a couple of ordinances. Madam Vice Chair.
The Public Works Ordinance in District 2, the mandatory referral, I will be moving to defer that 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
That is the 300 block of Ann Street mandatory referral.
Okay,
And
sure.
we are deferring that because we are in conversation around conservation easements.
Okay. All right, moving into resolutions. We have a couple of resolutions for council office. Questions or comments concerning any of those items? One of our resolutions will be honoring Dr. Burrs by renaming the Family Justice Center in her memory. Economic development. Anything under finance? Mayor's office has several board appointments, Parks and Public Works, wastewater, Office of Community Health. Chief, I think we've been asked to withdraw this, item W, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. The Office of Community Health, looking at item W, they had applied for this grant from the National Association of City and County Health Organizations. And so this subrecipient agreement was based on their expectation of receiving that grant. They did not receive that grant. Therefore, there is no need for the subrecipient agreement.
Okay. So council, if some would, Councilman Ledford?
Mr. Chair, my item was for under finance, but I'll wait till you're finished.
Okay. All right. Just
I do have a question on that.
on
About
W?
the subrecipient.
Okay. Okay.
So earlier today, I had asked a question about X, and it was my understanding that that one, in a series of emails, but I may have read them too quickly, we had not received that grant, and therefore I didn't need to worry about that, but that's the one prior.
It's the one prior.
W,
So
so X, we did receive that grant.
We did receive the grant for item X.
Okay, I have another email about one of those, so I'll read that before, and I'll get back to you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Councilman Ledford, you wanted to go back to finance, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Jay?
Just a quick question, something I haven't seen with my years on this dais, and I thought it was an interesting point to make. Item J, it's a fifth-year rebate computation. And it's not, I don't think, that ordinary, but is Weston, I see you there. If I understand correctly, this is earnings outpacing the restrictions set by the IRS. Do we do this often, obviously,
So
or not?
it's a little uncommon with the 2019 bonds. We got those in October, November 2019, and then obviously a couple months later the world shut down. So we typically spend those funds sooner, so with the earnings don't get to that point. But with those funds, because of the COVID pandemic, we weren't able to spend the money as quickly. So the earnings ended up being around $900,000 on that. So the IRS set certain restrictions because of the tax exempt bonds that the consultants went through, did their evaluation, and we ended up paying back about $500,000 of that out of the earnings. But again, it's an odd situation due to the COVID pandemic, really, just not being able to spend that money as timely as we would have liked to.
Is that a normal return on investment, or can you help me out with some strategy there?
Yeah, obviously it was the markets were a little bit better in that time frame as the economy was doing some different things, and so unexpected, but not normal at all.
Very good. And the reason I wanted to bring that attention, Mr. Chairman, is because it does not happen very often, and it's also in relation to the tax exempt status of the bond. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And I thought that was a good point to make. So,
Yes.
Weston, I appreciate that information.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, any other questions concerning this week's agenda items? If not, we'll move into next week's proposed agenda, January the 14th. All of our ordinances on first reading this week will be on final reading next week. We do have several ordinances under planning that we'll be discussing during planning and zoning later today. So any questions concerning those will be held to the planning and zoning committee meeting. Moving under resolutions, we have one under economic development that we will be discussing here in just a few minutes with an economic development committee meeting as well. And then under finance. Okay. Any questions concerning next week's proposed agenda? If not, we'll move into our purchase items for this afternoon. Any questions or comments about any of our purchase item requests? See no lights. Moving into future considerations. I do want to point out one item under finance. If you'll look, we do have an ordinance to amend the operating and capital improvements budget. We have that listed for January the 28th. That date is flexible. So we do have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting next week. That will be followed by a public hearing. But if we're not ready for a vote on the 28th, we can obviously put that off if need be. So that date is a little flexible. But we do want to start the process of the amendment. Okay, that takes us down to our committees for this afternoon, and we do have 3 committees: Economic Development Committee, Parks and Public Works, and then followed by Planning and Zoning. Council, we will need an attorney-client privilege meeting during our recess, so we need to be mindful of that. So, Councilwoman Coonrod, if you want to come chair our Economic Development Committee, I'll turn the chair over to you now at this time.
Can we get approval of the minutes? Thank you. Sheree, you want to go through the presentation first? Okay, we'll
Yes.
start with the presentation first.
Good afternoon, Council. Sherita Allen, Senior Advisor for Economic Development and Workforce Development here at the City of Chattanooga. I'd like to go over recommendations from staff for Council to adopt pilot policies. I will start by saying that PILOT is an acronym for those of us in the audience who are not familiar with it. It stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes. It is a tool in our toolkit for economic development, so similar to growing small business grants, construction mitigation grants, tax increment financing. Pilots are a tool that we use when we're growing economic development and bringing new dollars into the economy here in the city of Chattanooga and Greater Hamilton County. So one of the things we wanted to do is we have historically been operating under standards and systems and procedures on pilots for the last 2 decades. However, we have not had formal policies, which has led to some confusion at times. So we are recommending formal policies. And so we are starting with saying the goals are to have, to be better stewards of public resources. We want to create clear, predictable processes. We want to improve transparency so everyone's aware of the systems and the structure and how things flow. We want to increase Chattanooga's competitive position. That ties to smoother, faster processes. And then we want to grow jobs and investment in Chattanooga. We presented this presentation to the Industrial Development Board, the IDB, yesterday. So we did not change it for today because I know some of you have seen that from yesterday. And so these policies also align with the goals of the Industrial Development Board. We do have a recommendation for delegation of some pilots to the IDB, which is why we have this slide in here. And again, improving Chattanooga's competitive position. So when it comes to stewarding resources, and allow me to back up for a second and say, as we have been reviewing these policies and recommendations for formalizing these, we have spent the last 3 months having conversations with various members of the public and staff. And what we discovered was there were people that were concerned about our pilot policies and processes on the front end. Who gets them? Why do they get them? Which industries are picked? You know, why some are eligible and some aren't? We had other folks who were concerned with sort of the middle piece, which was the process. You know, does it go to committee? Does it not go to committee? Is there a public hearing? How long does it take? When do we put it on agenda? When is it not on the agenda? Could it go to the IDB as some other cities do, or do we keep it at the city? So people concerned about the process. And then we met with, I spoke with city auditor and county auditor regarding sort of the back end process. And that's the monitoring, the compliance, how are we verifying the jobs when a company says they are actually creating jobs, that piece. So there's that accountability component on the back end. So when we start looking at stewarding public resources, I just want us to keep in mind that we have met with numerous folks who pop in and out at different ends of the spectrum and want different things from these policies, and we've tried to accommodate most of those requests as we move forward to formalize some of these. So again, we hold taxes. I'm going to need my glasses for this one, sorry. So stewarding public resources. Hold taxes with schools harmless. That's one thing that we do. Keeping in mind, we're competing with cities that don't, but that's okay. That's our preference. As a community, we hold taxes associated with schools harmless. We want to codify the inclusion of an economic development fee. That is something that we have done for years. And again, we use those funds to fund our small business activities throughout the city. Outlining the reporting process, we want to implement, again, conflict of interest requirement. We're looking at requiring an economic impact analysis prior to approval. We're protecting stormwater fees. We're instituting a public hearing as part of the process, recognizing that does increase the time frame for an approval, but it also allows public input for it. So there's a public hearing that's part of this, and it requires an affidavit stating the project would not happen in Chattanooga without the but for. And so again, with these recruitment incentives, they're not you're not automatically eligible for it. So when a project comes to us, we need to see and understand that there's a but for. Were it not for this particular economic development tool, they would not be choosing Chattanooga for their either expansion or their relocation. So that's the stewarding piece. And let's see, clear and predictable process. We're proposing policies that will define what an eligible project is and what the minimum thresholds are. So again, keeping in mind, pilots that come to us, if they do not meet the minimum thresholds, the council will not see them. The IDB would not see them. The county would not see them. And so we want to codify that because currently we make those decisions. So there's some requests that just don't come to you. So again, 100 full-time jobs, 20 million in capital investment, specific industry sectors. And those are designed within the strategy that we have put together later with the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce's 5-year strategic plan, and then the Chattanooga Climbs plan as well. So again, looking at specific industry sectors, manufacturing, office, distribution, non-retail commercial, minimum wage of 80% of Hamilton County's average annual wage. So again, if a project is coming to us and it does not meet that minimum 80%, it's not eligible for a pilot. And we have those figures. I'll go through those when we get to a matrix that shows those. We're proposing delegating authority to the IDB for certain pilots that meet a certain level. And again, other communities are doing this, and this is something that we are proposing. It doesn't mean the county the city council would never hear a pilot. Pilots would still come to the council if they are above a certain level. It means sort of those everyday, transactional, competitive pilots that fall under a certain threshold, those would be delegated to the Industrial Development Board. And again, it's codifying sort of the standard percentages of a pilot. Going back to clear and predictable, again, we're putting into practice and to law job creation, the wages, the CapEx, the location in disadvantaged areas, looking at some of those other components. It's outlining the approval process, and it's providing flexibility for projects that do not meet the pilot or they're seeking a longer term. Those would stay with the city council. Here's our evaluation matrix. So what happens is if a project comes in and they are eligible, they meet the basic jobs, they meet the capital investment, they're in the targeted industry, it's a company that we want here because they're helping us build a talent pool or build a workforce or diversify our economy, those would then be plugged into this matrix where we start looking at, could they get additional, they automatically would get minimum points, they're coming in, they're eligible. They would be able to score additional points based on additional capital investment or higher wages or LEED certified building, all of those other things. And so that's where we spell this matrix out. And in briefing some of you on this council, I know there were some folks that wanted to add a few things to that. And so we can make those changes. It's just a function of looking at, this is how that matrix works when we start defining how long a pilot, what's the level of the pilot on this. So again, each point equals 1 year for the phase-in. The maximum incentive period for any project is 10 years or less unless otherwise approved by the city council. Minimum requirements, projects must score 4 points or higher to be eligible, and the average wage must be no less than 80% of Hamilton County's most recent average annual wage. Keeping in mind that wage changes, and so we would have to, every year we would come back and take a look at a project on that to make sure they're meeting that new average annual wage each year. And then manufacturing projects must have no less than $20 million in CapEx. Offices are no less than $5 million, and all projects must have at least 100 jobs. Targeted industries. So there are 2 slides to this. So the first one will start at the top, targeted industries. The state of Tennessee has identified targeted industries throughout the state. Some of that is based on, from an economic development standpoint, what are the assets of the state? What are our strengths? Where do we excel? And then how do we build complementary clusters around that to grow our economy? So that's the state level. And then we back up, and then we have targeted industries. Keeping in mind, some of the state targeted industries might not fit in Chattanooga. And I'll give you an example. There's a ball mine clay in Wheatley County in northwest Tennessee. So if you're manufacturing tiles, a certain percentage of your clay in your tiles is going to come from that ball mine. So they have incentives that are targeted around ceramics and manufacturing and firing and clay. We would not have that. So our targeted industries, as determined by the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce and their CLIMES plan, are as follows. So if you look at advanced manufacturing, it's electric vehicles, machinery manufacturing, outdoor products, specialty foods. Professional services, we're strong in freight services, headquarters, back office, creative media. Those are industries that we want. We want to be competitive in those areas. Future technology, obviously EPB, quantum technology, what's going on with the smart city with UTC, industrial design, engineering, robotics, and again, software and information technology, especially as we start looking at cybersecurity and some of those other things. So these are our targeted industries, and what we're proposing is that as we look at delegation, these would be the industries that are automatically delegated to the Industrial Development Board. So we would call these sort of the transactional pilots. They meet all eligibility. They do not exceed 10 million. They've got the jobs, and they fall within these targeted industries. Those would automatically be delegated to the Industrial Development Board. Keeping in mind that currently we see about 1 to 2 pilots on average a year. Like we might get 3 pilots a year, it's rare. And then that next slide, again, targeted industries on that piece. And so I know as we were going through some of the briefings, we had some questions, and I'd like to open it up so that council members can ask those questions, and we'll address some of those, or we're happy to come back and do another session that's just on some of those responses and questions.
Chip, Councilman. Chip, no, Rakita Dollar. All right, go ahead and have it. All right, you active? I'm good, get to make it active.
Yes, I have a comment or a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Oh, is it on Chip still? Oh.
All right. So thank you, Sharita, so much for the presentation. I appreciate you very much, and this is some great work you've done and you all have done in putting this together. So just a couple of questions. First is about clawback language. Is that listed in here?
We do have clawback that's listed both in our agreements, and we have clawback language. There's a section 10, I believe, that's monitoring, that's in the pilot policies that talks about how those policies and those agreements will be monitored, so yes.
Okay, thank you.
Keeping, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but keeping in mind, the city has an auditor that has been assigned just to pilots, the county. So the county is currently auditing all pilots, and we are working closely with that county auditor on the auditing of pilots in which we both participate.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, since the inception of the pilot program, which predates me, of course, what has been the net financial and employment gain realized by the city of Chattanooga? I know that Councilman Henderson has asked this question a variety of ways, a variety of years. I still don't have an answer, and I think this is a great time to ask. So just wanted to know what have we realized over the years since we've been accepted this program?
I am happy to provide that report as a follow-up. And in addition, each year we receive an annual summary from the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce, and we have an agreement with the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce where they facilitate the recruitment piece of economic development for us, the recruitment and expansion projects. And they submit to us a project report every year on the pilots.
Okay.
And it's called a pilot summary report. So when we pull that, we can see each year where the pilots are, the status of them. Hamilton County also has that similar report in a spreadsheet format on their website, and that will tell us, that will give us all of that information. So I'm happy to provide a link to the counties, and then I'm happy to provide the chamber one that we have.
Okay.
So, and I do understand, in the past, I looked at a report and I understood why it wasn't given to the council, because when you look at the report, it may look like a company is out of compliance, and it's because you would have to scroll over and look at their job creation years and see, oh, they still have another 2 years to get to their full job creation number. But when you're looking at it initially on a report, it looks like they're not compliant. They still have creation years to go. So we need to go through that and do some asterisks and kind of clean it up so that when you're looking at it, you automatically don't go, oh my goodness, they're not in compliance. It's like, they're not done yet. They still have time to go. So we will work on that report and get that to you annually, and then we will work on the full report. I should be able to get that to you in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you so much. That's it. Thank you, Chairwoman Coonrod. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the annual reporting to the council on our pilots needs to be in the policies, so that every year we have, and you know, what I would like to see is the number of pilots that we have out there, the number of years left, the percentage of that they have met their job requirements. I mean, that can all just be in a very, I think, simple report, but it'd be so that it's very clear and concise. The matrix eligibility is fantastic. I think we need that. Here's the one thing that I voiced a little bit of opposition against.
He cracked a smile, which made me nervous.
From the very beginning.
Now I'm shaking.
From the very beginning. And council, I would hope you would feel the same, but taxes, whether we're levying taxes or suspending taxes, in my opinion, falls on the shoulders of this council. I personally don't want to delegate that to another body, regardless of maybe how small or how detailed of a matrix that a pilot meets. I feel like all pilots need to come before this body for a vote. I understand that may slow down the process just a little bit, but I'm not sure that if we're the right fit for the city, and I'm sure somebody will let me know if I'm speaking out of turn here. I don't think slowing that process down that much is going to make a big difference. So personally, I have a problem with delegating any authority to the IDB for abating these taxes. Other than that, I like what you've presented. I would like to see an annual report written into the policy so that we are updated regularly or annually on the status of our pilots.
We are able to provide that annual report. We receive it, so we're able to provide that. And we can do that in a session, or we can simply distribute a report to you. It's entirely up to the council.
I think in a session so that it's publicly viewed, transparent would be probably the best way to do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Hill.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Sharita, first, I really do appreciate the thoughtful work on this policy. I agree completely that we need something, and I do appreciate what Chairman Henderson said about his concerns about things coming in front of council, but I do think that if we set a tight enough set of parameters for what we're looking for, what we believe will benefit Chattanooga, that it could make sense for certain pilot applications to go in front of the IDB. I mean, it certainly shines a light on how very important those IDB appointments are, right? As I approached this work serving the people of District 2 and thought about pilots, transparency was very important to me, and accountability was important to me. And when I think about the transparency piece, it's not just what qualifies for a pilot, but for forever, the economic incentive process has been sort of like a black box that lives at the chamber. Somebody calls somebody and conversations are had, and at the end of the day, somebody decides that something's good enough to come in front of city council, right? Clearly oversimplification, but nonetheless, that's sort of the way it works. And what we don't know is what we don't see, right? So by codifying our expectations, that helps us know that what we're not seeing is stuff that doesn't qualify, right? So I like that. it also makes it clear within these expectations what Chattanooga's looking for.
Right.
So to me, these expectations are very important that we get them right. Because economic incentives can dramatically shape the future of a community. And we'll be talking some about Novonix here in a few minutes. And, you know, you get a whale, you better be ready to eat blubber for a long time. You better hope there's a lot of it, right? And what if it goes away? So to that point, I'd like to explore with you a couple of things. First of all, you know, I do most of my work related to affordable housing, and so I'm always looking at area median income, AMI. And this policy is focused on average annual wage. So those, you confirmed for me yesterday, are two different numbers.
They are.
So help us understand how those two numbers compare with one another. What an area median income is for a individual in Chattanooga versus an average area or average annual wage.
Okay, so as we look at AMI, it is a HUD designation statistic, and it is typically based on median household income. So the AMI number is going to involve household, which could have a number of wage earners in that household. It is also measured at the MSA level, which could be a county or multiple counties, depending on how large the MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area is. And so looking at Chattanooga, the Chattanooga MSA, that number would be $92,100.
For how many people? 5?
That is for a household.
Of how many people?
I do not have that number. I
Okay.
can get that number for you, but that's household.
My educated guess would be that would be at least a 5-person household, a 4-person at the very least. So minimum 2 wage earners at 92. So I think what would be interesting for us as an apples to apples comparison is what is our 1-person household area median income? And what is our, if in fact the area average wage is a 1-to-1, let's get them as apples to apples as we can. So we can
Correct.
make an informed decision on that.
Okay.
Now, I appreciate that within the matrix, if we're at that 80%, we're subtracting 2 points within the matrix, right? So let me go to this matrix and take a look so I'm not, sometimes I'm one number off, and in this business, if that's a 0, it can be a problem.
It's a big problem.
A big problem, yeah. So in the matrix, for grading, if that area average wage, if they're going to be paying that, they get 2 points subtracted. And they only gain a point on their application if they're at 100% of the wage, correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Correct, because our goal is to recruit and incentivize companies that are expanding, that are creating livable wages and higher wages. So they get more points the higher the wage.
Right, so all the more reason for us to really understand what number is that actually that we are expecting, because averages and medians, you know, can be quite different. Okay, the other thing I wanted to explore with you on this matrix are 4 items that if you got a 1 point, you'd have 4 and you'd get to go to IDB, but they're vague to me. Community benefit commitments, local community cooperation, employee benefits and apprenticeships programs, and my personal favorite, exceptional corporate stewardship. I just love that. To everyone here, you're asking for tax abatement, but you're an exceptional corporate steward. I just think those two things go together great. I don't see in the policy where those are defined. So I would love to get more information from you before we move into a vote on on what that really means to Chattanooga for Chattanoogans.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Because what an exceptional corporate steward looks like here in Chattanooga could mean a lot of things. It could mean that you build the next high school. It could mean that you commit to giving $20 million a year to affordable housing.
It could mean you're an exceptional employer. It could mean you're an employer that has 4% turnover versus some employers that have 30 and 40% turnover.
Yeah, so we need that defined so that we know if we like that or not.
Thank you for that.
And the same with community benefits commitments. Again, those can have teeth or not. We know that we have state preemptions. Local community cooperation is, I see the pros and cons of that one. I like that I would like us to have a process that supports when a more genuinely grassroots collective of community members, neighborhood associations, et cetera, support something. What I'm a little more nervous about is what we count as community. You know, because I think in Chattanooga, we all know we have haves and have-nots, and if all the haves get together and they count as our community support and they get a point for that, maybe we consider how these points are allocated. And then the employee benefits and apprentice programs, definitely I want to understand how valuable those are and how real they are. You know, 3 apprentices coming out versus a robust apprentice program are very different. So I look forward to further details. I agree completely with my colleagues about having an annual update on the state of our pilots. And I would say I understand that we have access to a giant dashboard of information. Something that's been exceptionally useful for this council in the last several months has been inviting our ARPA recipients in to present and to really tell us what's happening. And I'm not sure if we can go quite that far with the pilot. I would argue we probably could, but I think it would be very useful in stretching our economic development muscle as a council to really be able to connect the dots with, we gave this incentive and here's what we're seeing happening in our community. And Councilwoman Hill feels like they're an exceptional community citizen. Steward, yes. I think that's all for me now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sharita, hello.
Hello, Councilman.
So thank you.
We've been working on this for 7 years, I believe.
7 years. I've had a strong interest in our pilot policy and have been versed in many different directions. One who I see sitting in the audience back here, who's been a great influence and source of information. Ms. Sharp, thank you. So I feel like the crux of what we're presenting is, first of all, the matrix makes a lot of sense because it sets forth, I guess, the parameters from which anybody can take a look at and say, well, these are our policies. So I applaud that. So now I'm going to, and because we don't have all night, I'm going to dig down into a couple of items that I think maybe would help. First of all, this is on the agenda for next week, but you're not in a hurry, are you on this?
No, sir, we are not.
Okay.
Again, we have current
We're still in
standard
draft form.
operating procedures and processes, so
Sure.
our pilots will continue to move forward, yes.
Okay. So, and listening to council so far and just paying attention over the years, I feel like that the delegation of authority to the IDB, first of all, I want you to further drill down for me on what a transactional pilot is, because I feel like that's the crux of where this is going, or the meat on the bone, so to speak, of what we're trying to accomplish. Because the process, as we know, can drag out to where either parties lose interest or we lose a project, or people move on. I mean, we need to act responsibly in government, and we say that, but we have a process currently that is not responsive. It is very lengthy. So right now, for example, if I have correctly, you would go through 4 meetings, and that's quite a while, especially in between time.
Right.
So
It's a transactional pilot typically would be a 10-year pilot that meets all of the eligibility criteria. It is it's in our select targeted industry. I've got a little bird on my shoulder whispering.
I heard Jermaine, all the way up here.
So it would fall within those targeted sector industries. So it's not state level, so it's not somebody coming to us and they're in ceramics, and ceramics is not in the chamber plan. These would be pilots that are eligible, that are in targeted sectors, that are 10-year pilots. They're not extended multi-year pilots of the 10-year pilots. And so what happens is, those are kind of routine, that's a routine recruitment project. That would be a growing small business incentive grant that meets all the eligible criteria. The policies have been, bless you, the policies have been approved by City Council. The systems are in place. It's delegated to the IDB, and the IDB approves it because there's staff and there are systems behind the scenes doing all of the back office to scrub them and make sure they're eligible and they're meeting all of the deadlines and the plans are in place, and then they go forward to the IDB for vote. That's a growing small business incentive, which is funded from general fund and sent over to the Industrial Development Board for implementation. It's a small grant. The maximum you can receive on that is $10,000. So again, there's a limit to it, and it's clearly defined. It's just implemented through a different body by approval of resolution and ordinance from this board. There's not an ordinance because you're not moving money over to the IDB, but there should be a resolution with policies to move it. Keeping in mind, the council could adopt policies and not delegate authority.
Sure.
Like, the authority does not have to be delegated. The policies could be adopted, and the council could continue to hear all the pilot projects that come to it.
So I think where I'm trying to get to is that it feels like, and I've heard this for years, about our competitiveness or lack of dealing with other cities. And I'm not saying we should copy anybody, because we're actually doing some pretty innovative and new things with our VIP program, for example, that other folks aren't doing. So I'm not exactly copycat. But what I'm trying to get to is, I do understand that this process is lengthy, it costs a lot of time, and it is for transactionable pilots.
Correct.
And that's what I'm trying to differentiate, what it is and what it isn't.
Correct.
So, for example, and I've read all this Novonix expansion that's coming after this presentation, would not fall into this delegation at all.
At all. That would still stay with the city council.
If we were outside our target industry or sector, it would still come to city council.
And if you were above a certain capital investment level, yes.
Because in the beginning, when the idea, I guess, was floated for delegating some of those responsibilities for transactionable pilots, I literally went to, we're giving up our authority and oversight. And I don't think that's not what's happening or being asked at all or proposed. So I want to make sure that's clear. And then I do think we need to dive back in. I found some things, and I'll share with you offline, where I think we need to clarify some language, and I think you might agree, where we need to add in some definitions to clarify on the reporting or the changes, where the responsibilities go to. Phil's not looking at me too nervous, that's good. But I think what I'm trying to understand is, here's what I want us to leave with today. I want you to look at a way for option A and an option B, so to speak. We have a delegation of IDB authority for transactionable. Let's make sure we keep that word in front of what we're talking about, not all pilots. But also, if you can look at a way to reduce the number of trips or hearings. Right now, I think it's up to 4, which is, then has to go to the county. 5, thank you, Jermaine.
Actually, it's 6. It's
6. Do you see where I'm going here? How do we get that number cut in half?
I know where you're going, I've been there.
I'm trying to look for an option, in the dear absence, or the absence of my dear friend, Dr. Burrs, I'm trying to get to what yes looks like.
I love that, yes.
By finding a way we can all keep our oversight, keep our concerns at the forefront, but find a way that mitigates the concern. And I think if we can find a way to reduce the number of trips or visits or, then we have something to, I think we can lean on pretty well. Does that make sense?
It does, and so you mentioned an option A, and what was the option B?
Oh, option A is the delegation,
Okay.
what you're proposing, the delegation of
Got it.
transactionable pilots to
Okay.
the IDB, understanding that they have met all the parameters. So I sit on the planning commission, and when I think of the transactionable pilot, I'm almost thinking of a preliminary plat. It has been vetted, it has gone through the entire process, all the boxes have been checked per the standards, neighborhood
Yes.
standards that have been set by the city or the county. And this is what a transactionable pilot is, correct? It has been vetted, it has passed the but-for test. I love the fact you put an affidavit attached to that, because it's the one question that I was taught, first and foremost, to ask was the but-for.
The but-for.
And now you're putting a legal
Right.
entity with, or action with that. So I think we are hitting on some really good cylinders, but I also hear what council's saying, and that I think we just want to be involved. We want to know what's going on. We want to be aware. So I'm trying to give you this. So that's A, is what you're proposing. B is, how do we cut that down to 2? And we can still retain the oversight and the transparency that it deserves, but maybe that's a great option. So, and I have a whole long list of other things, but given the time, and from what I think that's where I'll stop, Madam Chair. So I do appreciate you letting me ramble a little bit. This is something that's been of great interest to me for many years.
Yes, no problem. Vice Chair Hill?
Thank you. I just have one thing to add based on what Councilman Ledford said. I appreciate the thought at looking at how we make this process more efficient, but I would just like to point out that we need to be very thoughtful about the how and the when of the public hearing, because that's a piece that has felt not as useful as it could be. And so let's think about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just as an aside, the public hearing is not required by law. It is
Right.
something that administration decided to implement for pilots, but it's not a requirement. So moving forward, we will take a look at sort of how that's structured and look at that piece.
Yeah, I think that is one of those defining elements of what it is to be a good corporate citizen in Chattanooga, to be willing to talk about it and hear from folks. And at the end, it's a very valuable transaction. So I think it's worth their time if we can find an efficient way to do it. Thank you.
Any, Councilman Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd raised my hand, lowered my hand, and raised it back up again. Councilman Henderson covered one of my main points in not having a whole lot of comfort in delegating any kind of taxing authority, despite the size, is a big concern. I did have one question, though, as a kind of a follow-up to one thing that you said with the number of pilots being 2, maybe 3 in a year. I mean, what really is the potential expectation should this pass? Should we be able to speed things up, cut some, eliminate some red tape from this process of the number of pilots that may come before or come to the city of Chattanooga and, let's say, go through this process and not through the council? Is there, I mean, we're trying to do this for a reason, right? We want to fast track, we want to encourage, we want to, increase that benefit potentially to the community. Is there any kind of guess or expectation as to what that might result in?
Currently, we're probably looking at 3 or 4, keeping in mind, we're also having conversations with the State Economic and Community Development Department, ECD, looking at their pipeline because they sometimes require a local match. We're having conversations with the county because, again, projects also go to the county and then come to us. And then having conversations with the chamber about the chamber's pipeline. And then we also have the economy. I mean, there were a lot of businesses that were just sort of on hold for the last 12 months, waiting to see what would happen. And now, people are ready to move again. So we'll see what happens, as we start 2025. We anticipate there are probably some companies that are ready to move forward on some projects that they've been holding off on in the last 18 months or so.
So if we're 2 to 3 and we go to 3 to 4, we're not talking about anything anytime soon being a significant increase in.
No.
Okay. That was my expectation as well. And I'll just end with one last comment. It is so good to have you back, not just to Chattanooga, but the city itself. And despite Mr. Wood being in attendance, you're my favorite person to step up to the mic and talk about pilots. So thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It is
Yeah,
good.
that goes for Jermaine too. It's still you.
Jermaine filled in my absence. It is it is good to be back. And I appreciate the council asking as many questions as the council asked. I mean, I probably received 30 questions. And so just receiving the input tells me how much this council thinks about economic development. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from council? Thank you again, Sharita. And yeah, we are glad that you're back. It's been a long time coming. Listen, they couldn't function without you. I'm glad we was able to get you back. I don't know what incentives they got you to come back from the state. But thank you, Jermaine.
Thank you, council.
All right, Ms. Nicole, you continue with the, okay. If you'll read the resolutions, 9C.
A resolution authorizing the mayor, his designee, to enter into a donation agreement with the Trust for Public Land and substantially the form attached to accept the donation of tax map number 128 PP01 on Grove Street in District 5, tax map number 128 PP002 on Moon Street in District 5, tax map number 128 IF001 on Ridgecrest Drive in District 9, tax map number 128 PH001 on Wheeler Avenue in District 9, tax map number 168 CB017 on West Side Drive in District 9, and to execute all documents required to complete the transaction and with the intent of the parcels to become a part of the city's growing urban ecology preserve system with the execution of the declaration of restricted covenants.
Any questions? Ken, is that your, Ken, you got a question or that's just the old hand?
It's all light, ma'am.
Okay. D.
A resolution authorizing the mayor, his designee, to enter into a first agreement to exercise option to renew with the Hamilton County, Tennessee Board of Education and substantially the form attached for use of a portion of tax parcel number 168 IC032 for the continued operation of the Cedar Hill Head Start, Early Head Start Program at 4701 Divine Avenue for an additional term of 1 year through December 31, 2025 for the amount of $1.
E.
A resolution authorizing the mayor, his designee, to award up to $195,000 in home funds to Chattanooga Community Housing Development Organization, CCHDO, to construct a house at 724 North Highland Park Avenue for affordable home ownership.
F.
A resolution authorizing the mayor, his designee, to award up to $195,000 in home funds to Chattanooga Community Housing Development Organization, CCHDO, to construct a house at 729 North Highland Park Avenue for affordable home ownership.
G.
A resolution authorizing the mayor, his designee, to enter into a first agreement to exercise option to renew with the Hamilton County, Tennessee Board of Education and substantially the form attached for the use of tax parcel numbers 136LM002, 136LM005, and 136LM006 for the continued operation of the Avondale Head Start, Early Head Start Program at 2302 Ocoee Street for an additional term of 1 year through December 31, 2025 for the amount of $1.
H.
A resolution to amend resolution number 32222 to increase the grant amount for emergency rental assistance and eviction prevention program, ERA EPP funds from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, THDA, to be used for rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention activities from $929,600 to a total amount of $1,140,000.
All right, next Tuesday, 8A.
Would you like for me to read aye?
Yes. Read aye, yes.
A resolution authorizing the mayor and his designee to enter into a first agreement to exercise option to renew with the Hamilton County, Tennessee Board of Education and substantially the form attached for use of a portion of tax parcel number 066MD014 for the continued operation of the Daisy Head Start Early Head Start Program at 9517 West Ridge Trail Road in Sauter Daisy, Tennessee, for an additional term of 1 year through December 31, 2025, for the amount of $1.
All right, next Tuesday, 8A.
An ordinance creating a volunteer attainable housing incentive program and authorizing certain incentives to be provided to property owners who seek to build multi-unit attainable and mixed-income housing in Chattanooga pursuant to Tennessee Code annotated Section 1133601A to adopt a program for multi-unit attainable housing development and to authorize the Chattanooga Hamilton County Regional Planning Agency to grant certain incentives for voluntary development of multi-unit attainable housing as set forth herein.
9A.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Chattanooga approving policies and procedures for payment in lieu of tax transactions and consistent with such policies and procedures delegating to the Industrial Development Board of the City of Chattanooga the authority to negotiate and accept payments in lieu of ad valorem taxes with respect to certain projects to be located in the City of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and finding that such payments are deemed to be in furtherance of the public purposes of the Industrial Development Board of the City of Chattanooga as defined in Tennessee Code annotated Section 753305.
Thank you, Ms. Nicole. All right, Jermaine, you ready for the second presentation?
Yes, and so at this time, I'll ask Sharita Allen and Adam Myers, Vice President of Economic Development from the Chattanooga Chamber, to come up.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Adam Myers. I'm the Vice President of Economic Development for the Chattanooga Area Chamber. And again, thank you so much for your continued partnership and support of economic development efforts for the community. I mean, just hearing the presentation a moment ago, I really appreciate all of your all's thoughts and comments on this and look forward to discussing an exciting expansion opportunity with you today. Though I don't think I will be able to beat, unfortunately, Ms. Allen in presentation and how we hear from folks, but I hope maybe to at least beat Mr. Wood. So, as we have heard about in the papers, Novonix has been really operating here in Chattanooga for the past 7 years and is a leading battery materials and technology company providing advanced high-performance materials and equipment and services for the global lithium-ion battery industry. The company does currently operate 2 facilities in Chattanooga at 1029 West 19th Street, their Riverside facility, and 353 Corporate Place in Lookout Valley. And we do have a representative from Novonix who would like to say a few words, their Chief Operating Officer, Darcy McDougall, who would just like to give a brief overview for the company for you all.
Thank you, Adam, for the introduction, and thank you, Council and Chamber members, for the support to date and the opportunity to be here today. Let me just say we wouldn't be here without you and the support that we've gotten to date. So first of all, I want to thank you all for that. So as mentioned, we are a leading U.S.-based battery materials and technology company. So we manufacture synthetic graphite, which is one of the main components in electric vehicles and energy storage systems, and we are part of that supply chain. So today, virtually all of the world's synthetic graphite production is controlled by China. So what we are looking to do is bring that production here to the U.S. in order to be able to support the U.S. lithium-ion battery manufacturing sector. For the past number of years, as Adam mentioned, we've been focused on a more sustainable and less energy-intensive way of producing synthetic graphite. And because of the innovations that we've done right here in Chattanooga, we've been able to demonstrate first at small scale at our research and development site in Lookout Valley, and more recently at the mass production scale from our Riverside facility, The innovations that we've been able to demonstrate have allowed us to secure binding offtake agreements, so contracts with Tier 1 battery manufacturers Stellantis, PowerCo, and Panasonic Energy. They are set to begin production later this year at a Riverside facility and through 2026 and beyond. So last year, our leadership in this sector was also recognized in the form of a $100 million grant from the Department of Energy, Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains Office, as well as a $103 million qualifying advanced energy project tax credit. More recently, the company has been offered conditional commitment for a $754 million loan from the Department of Energy that would support Novonix's first greenfield site located on 812 acres in the Enterprise South Industrial Park. In addition to the 20,000 tons of production per year at a Riverside facility, this plant will be able to support an additional 30,000 tons a year by 2028, with the potential to expand to up to 75,000 tons per year. The project is anticipated to create 500 full-time operational jobs and 500 construction jobs, with the start of full production capacity planned for late 2028. In preparation for this project, second phase of facility engineering design has been complete and civil site design is now in progress. And finally, Chattanooga has been home to Novonix since 2017, where it has established strong community connections and laid a foundation for workforce development programs. Primary community workforce partners include Project Return, Lookout Valley Middle High School, UTC, Chattanooga State, and Tennessee State. We couldn't be prouder to call Chattanooga home, and we feel blessed and fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to expand our production right here in Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as Darcy, Mr. McDougall had explained, the expansion overview for Novonix, what we are looking at today, and discussion for this project really began 2 years ago between staff with the chamber, with the company, as well as staff with city administration, the mayor's office, and county administration and the mayor's office for Hamilton County as well. Novonix is proposing to acquire a 182-acre site located at Enterprise South Industrial Park with the potential for up to 500 new jobs by March 31st of 2030, which is what their ramp-up period would be as outlined in their agreement. Their average wages would be $61,000 annually, so that estimated new annual payroll at full ramp-up is expected to bring to the community over $30 million in new payroll. The capital investment for the project is $450 million in real property and $550 million in personal property, which is a total of $1 billion estimated capital investment for the project. And you can see here from a site acquisition standpoint, they are proposing to acquire the site at $25,000 per acre for the site at Enterprise South. The pilot request, so this would be a standard declining pilot for 15 years. And as Ms. Allen talked about in the pilot policies presentation, this would be the type of pilot that would always come to City Council because it goes beyond that 10-year period. And that is partly due because of the size of the project and the investment here. This is a very significant catalytic impact of a project. So year one, it would be 100% abatement, whereas year two, it would be 75, year three, it would be 60%, and then year four, between years 4 and 15, it would be 50%. In the agreement, it does continue our policy of not abating school taxes for the project. So they would be paying full school taxes for the project, and also requires a 15% economic development fee payment for each year of the pilot. Within the agreement as well, negotiating between both mayor's offices and the company, it also dedicates an additional $13.3 million in economic development fees, which if you look at, we'll break down an economic impact analysis later, is roughly about just a little bit more than half of the total economic development impact fees for the project that will dedicate for support that go beyond just support for the company, but goes into things like improved bus service at Enterprise South Industrial Park via CARTA, support of public-private childcare and early learning expansion at Enterprise South Industrial Park, marketing campaign that can not only attract workers to Chattanooga's manufacturing sector, but can also help us market to our existing local employers or employees here and folks in some of our local communities to be able to really market how to get these type of jobs. And then also looks at potential for future infrastructure improvements that are going to be necessary for the site as well. Hamilton County is also proposing to dedicate at least $5 million of their fees to support education initiatives within Hamilton County school districts. Right now, that's outlined in the agreement as the Gateway School, really providing and boosting workforce development efforts to provide career and technical education pathways. And this funding would only come from Hamilton County's share of the economic development fees. So the company has also outlined various community benefits that they plan to enact as part of this project as well. Not only making good faith efforts in consultation with the community to develop collaborative research programs and partnerships with the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and their College of Engineering and Computer Science, but also collaboration between UTC and the company's current university program partners that they even have internationally. The company will also make good faith efforts to really publicize available job opportunities at the project to make sure that we are maximizing the opportunities for qualified residents of Hamilton County, and that's those residents as they seek to gain employment at the project. And then again, going through these community benefits, the company will make these efforts to also publicize all of these construction and service contract opportunities for the companies to make sure that we're trying to get those going to local contractors in Hamilton County. Lastly, the company will also make good faith efforts to encourage the employment of ex-offenders, much as they've talked about with some of their partnerships with Project Return, but with also various other community organizations and partners too, and through their own entire internal hiring process. And the company is also planning to provide financial education, planning, and training and information for all of their new full-time employees and highlight the opportunities to participate in the company's retirement plan and the benefits of those retirement plans. The overall project impact for the 15-year pilot is shown on this chart. As you can see here on the economic development fees paid to the city, you are expecting just under $11 million from an economic development fee standpoint over the course of that 15-year period. For the county, it's very similar from a payment standpoint, so a total of just under $22 million in economic development fees. And again, only $13.3 million are dedicated for this for these benefits from the project standpoint. The payments in lieu of tax that would be made during the city to the county and the school district during this 15-year period estimate roughly $79,431,000. So in total, the project during the pilot term would still be paying $101,363,000 to the community for the project. And the net incentive to the company when you take out those incentives or the taxes that they're paying as well as the fees that they're paying is roughly $54 million, almost $55 million over that 15-year period. So this is just an estimate of their tax phase-in. This was a phase-in attempt designed by Younger and Associates, who also provided this economic impact analysis for us. And it's based on the company's projected ramp-up of their capital investment. Again, these are just an estimate because it really depends on when their pilot term starts. And in their agreement, they have set dates where they need to start their pilot term. I believe, if I took the note down correctly, it is their job creation needs to be created on or before in 2029, and then their pilot term would start in the following year at the latest. The other thing that this pilot agreement does come with is the potential for a phase 2 expansion that would fall within this pilot agreement as it exists. That would add an additional 675 new jobs, an additional $1.1 billion in investment for the company, and the investment of jobs would be included under this pilot agreement if the company exercises the option to move forward with the expansion. What's really important to note is that this would not extend the term of the pilot. It would not renegotiate the terms of the pilot. It would just put these jobs and investment under the current pilot terms, and the company would be having to monitor that from a compliance standpoint moving forward. So the company would need to notify the city and the county of their intent to move forward with phase 2 within 4 years of the execution of this pilot agreement, and then they would have to start construction on phase 2 the following year for that. The company would also, again, need to begin construction within 5 years of that, and it would dedicate about $6.4 million in economic development fees from this new investment back towards that in a very similar outlined manner. So with that, I'm happy to take questions, and certainly we have representatives from the company here, as I know there are some questions, particularly about how the company is also performing currently, as they do have another existing pilot.
Thank you. Chairman Henderson. Hester. Sorry. It was on.
I just want to make a comment. Thank you for your Novonix commitment to the city of Chattanooga. Excited about the project. Thank you.
Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Adam and Darcy, I mean, I've pretty much been involved with the Novonix project from the very beginning, when they moved to Big Blue, and I've been impressed with their operations, their level of technology, and, it's cutting edge. One of the things that I was concerned with at the very beginning, and still concerned with, is the fact that, and I've talked to Charles about this before, this is going to create 500 jobs. We're abating city taxes and county taxes. What I like to see is some kind of assurances or a good faith effort that those jobs are going to be filled by city residents or at the least county residents. Not going into Bradley County, not going into Walker County, not that that's not good or important, because we are sort of a regional hub, and I get the fact that when we're strong, all the area is strong as well. My concern is, though, our city residents, making sure that we have these jobs, being able to create a pipeline, which means that we've got to go out and make some additional efforts to cultivate that talent, to bring that talent in. One of the things we have currently right now, a 4-year agreement at Lookout Valley, $250,000 4-year agreement with Lookout Valley now. State of the art lab out there. My concern is at the end of that 4 years, when the money runs out, can we take some of the money from this pilot and renew or continue the work there at Lookout Valley with additional funding so that those students can be trained in order to fall right into those jobs.
What I'd like to do is ask Darcy to come up to speak to his partnership with Lookout Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. And we realize that one of our biggest challenges is going to be workforce development. And, I think we've demonstrated to date that we've been very dedicated to the city of Chattanooga, whether it be full-time employees and or contractors, such as Adman Electric and King Industries. The Lookout Valley battery program is something we're very proud of, and we absolutely know and need to look at programs like that and extending them further now that we're going to be here in a greater capacity. So we're excited to look at that and commit to looking at programs like it and copying and paste it throughout the needs to.
The next thing is creating cohorts that would maybe even through our community centers be able to cultivate and develop talent and workforce from going into maybe into some of our underprivileged community centers to be able to develop. One of the best ways for rent to become affordable is when my worth becomes more. In other words, as my education goes up, my value increases, my pay increases, more things become affordable. So, when we're talking about affordable housing, it's not only lowering rent, but it's also raising the value of an individual in what their job skill level is. I think going into our community centers, developing cohorts that will be able to, at least on a base level, train some of our citizens to be able to enter this type of workforce, with it being at Enterprise South, it'd be on a bus line to where many of our residents would be able to catch a bus, go to work, and then, of course, hopefully with enough income, be able to buy an automobile. But I think looking at programs that we could develop inside of our community centers and develop our workforce there, I think would be worth taking a look at. Because when I think about 500 jobs, we're going to have to create a pipeline for that. And I would like to see those jobs come from Chattanooga.
Yep, nothing would make us happier as well. So happy to continue to look at new and creative ways for us to accomplish that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilman Lefford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Adam, thanks for the presentation. I did read over the documents, and I'll send some suggestions as to reporting that I think strengthens the document, especially in relation to the annual report. So I'll send that to Sharita.
Absolutely.
I'll make but on the note of working within our community, I want to commend you for being here as the representative for Novonix, because it means a lot that we get to interact with you, and I'm super glad that Chairman Henderson has had the experience he has with Novonix in his district, and I believe in District 7 as well. You've become a major part in the fabric of our community. And I think when we go back to and talk about your good faith efforts, that is extremely valuable to us. And I'll tell you why it's valuable, because TCA prohibits us from local preferences and set-asides. So as much as we want to put something in writing to hold your feet to the fire, this relationship is built on good faith. And I think that from what I've heard over the years about Novonix and its willingness to not only invest in Chattanooga, but call Chattanooga home and expand here, is a testament to that good faith. So I'm glad to see that, Adam, is loaded with good faith. And I hope that and pray that that encouragement continues, because that is a vital part of working together in this environment, and bringing those jobs is extremely important. But we also have to be cognizant of what the impact is going to be on the other side of that. That's more people and more growth to our city and our county. And that is something that we also have to consider. And I hope that, I'm sure that conversation will happen at County Commission. But as we grow, they say a rising tide lifts all ships. And I hope that this, we're smart. Hope we're very smart when we think about this. And so I appreciate, and I want to say a special note about the good faith efforts and how that actually applies within a legal constraints of a document like this. So thanks, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you very much. It's exciting to be a city that is considered for investment like this. I have two thoughts. When we have a $1 billion, potentially a $2 billion investment, it's going to come with a lot of great things, but also with challenges. And so I start thinking about the infrastructure impact. I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity for growth in along Highway 58, probably District 5 and in District 6. I'd like us to be mindful of what happens to Lee Highway and Bonnie Oaks, how we think about those arteries. They can be pretty clogged, and we need to be forward thinking. The other question, or the other thing I'd like to explore briefly, I think Darcy might be most helpful. I'd like to talk about resilience, because bringing a major employer into a community is a fantastic thing, but losing a major employer is a horrible thing. And when I consider my role as a city council person, I'm a steward not just for the 4 years I'm elected, but for a 30-year horizon, a 40-year horizon of generational impact. So I'd like to understand better, Darcy. You said that your working is focused in the U.S. lithium-ion battery sector. And we talked last time, the last pilot, about U.S. security and how important it is that we be developing this technology stateside. The accounts that you have, Stellantis, PowerCo, and Panasonic, what are those products building batteries for?
All three of those are building batteries for electric vehicles. So
Okay.
PowerCo was founded by Volkswagen and is one of their subsidiaries, and Panasonic Energy supplies Tesla. And Stellantis supplies Chrysler.
Chrysler, okay. In the event that we saw a significant change in the electric vehicle industry,
Right.
I mean, we've already seen some pendulum shift, more toward, people are purchasing more hybrid vehicles right now than electric as it's an emerging technology, et cetera. What is Novonix's ability to pivot to serve other markets? What are expansion markets that are out there for you?
Sure. Two things on that. With all of the current synthetic graphite essentially coming from China, the demand for where we are at today is over 1,000 kilotons of synthetic graphite per year. So even with Riverside and a fully phased 1, phase 2 expansion here, we're talking about 2 to 5% of the current demand in the U.S. alone. So the growth opportunity to take market share that exists today is one thing. So I find there's a lot of security in that, being able to onshore it in the first place. It protects you somewhat against a decline in the market because you're still only a drop in the bucket, so to speak. Two is the energy storage market, which arguably could be larger. Synthetic graphite is really the one common material amongst all of the various chemistries of the lithium-ion battery. So it's required for every type of application in the world today for that purpose. So we're excited to be able to start to diversify into those markets. And with these 3 tier 1 battery manufacturers and cell makers, they will force upon us the quality programs and the energy densities and the product quality that we'll be able to start out by making the best batteries and be very well positioned to then diversify into other markets that maybe do not require as much product quality and or energy density.
Okay.
So
That's helpful.
I feel good about
because
that.
I think about $4 billion worth of investment in the auto sector essentially sitting at Enterprise South over the course of X number of years. And wonderful as long as that sector stays strong. We all know what happened to Detroit, to Seaford, Delaware, to any number of places. So I appreciate that, the fact that what you're saying is you're going to be manufacturing to a very high quality. So as you diversify, not everything requires that level of expertise, but you're already going to have it in your back pocket. And we're going to be training folks in Chattanooga to work to that level. So that's a good thing. That is all my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions? Thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple of questions. Because Chairman Henderson hit on one about prioritizing local hire, because so many job pilots come before us and we don't even get a third of the workers from Chattanooga from here. There's recruitment from out of the state or, other counties that end up getting the jobs, and it's very minimal. So most definitely would like to keep that on your radar. But out of the 504 jobs that you propose that you'll create, what type of positions will it be, like entry-level, skilled, administrative, manufacturing?
All of the above. At that scale, you really have a diverse cross-section of, executive engineering and operator and general labor, administrative skill sets. But we're manufacturing facilities, so the bulk of that will be in operators and technicians.
I know we may have covered it, but what's the expected timeline from completion, like construction to operating full?
Right, so we hope to be moving from construction and into operation in 2028.
Yeah, I guess we could most definitely thank President Biden for the Defense Production Act, so we can create graphite domestically, and which is the question here to really, that I really want to hone in on, is that we have a federal prison in California, and if I'm not mistaken, it's Victorville, and I think I shared it with you guys 7 years ago when you came in front of council for the first pilot. And so what those inmates do is they work with lithium batteries, creating graphite creating a battery production, federal prison. So if you weren't the person then, I just want to make you aware that that's what they do under the umbrella of a company called Unicore that so many people are so familiar with. They make 13 cents an hour. And some make a little more, depending on how long their prison sentence is that they've been working in this factory under Unicore. But you mentioned that you partner with Project Return, which is an organization that help people re-entering back into society, obtain employment. How many of those individuals that you've hired at your company, the Lookout Valley location or either the one downtown?
How many Project Return?
Or not even project, it don't have to be Project Return participants. I know how that program operates, but just people with background challenges. We don't refer to them as convicted felons anymore. We humanize them. So people that have background challenges.
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but they're certainly, we've certainly done a good job, I think, of partnering with the community, partnering with local recruiters, partnering with the local universities and colleges. And same response as I had to Chip here. We look forward to coming up with new and creative ways to help out wherever we can in those areas.
Okay, thank you. I'd like for you to give me those numbers. And I would like to see how we can add more people with background challenges, because we know that those individuals that they need a job, they're gonna work. Most of the time, they're coming home on probation. And we talk about, when we give these job pilots, companies, they say firsthand that, yeah, we wanna hire, we wanna work with those populations, but the reality of the matter is that HR has a lot of red tape that prevent people from getting hired due to background or what they have, the charges and things like that. Now, considering that this site here that's gonna be in Enterprise South, which is right next to Volkswagen, a few miles behind it, there's an elementary school, Harrison Elementary. So the environmental impact, I'm sure you all done did all your studies with that stuff. You guys are great at it. But that would be something that I know that you'll have to take into consideration as far as hiring people with our background challenges. But again, thank you for the presentation. I'm really excited for the growth of you guys and the 504 jobs that you're gonna bring to Chattanooga and to our county. I'm hopeful that at least half of them will be residents of the city of Chattanooga within our county. And not just that, is that we can get people that have background challenges that have a hard time getting employed, that will be able to be employable with Novonix.
Thank you.
All right, and then we got one more. Councilman Leffler.
Madam Chair, if you allow me, and I'll follow up on this offline, but in my review of the document, I was a little curious on how you're going to look at the determination date in relation to minimum jobs requirements, and wonder what LLC or EIN number that you're going to be using those numbers for reporting. But I don't expect an answer here, and I'm sure Mark's probably looking at me going, oh, great question. But I'll send an email on that, because it was a little bit an item of concern that I had in how that's addressed. You don't have to answer it here, but I will send an email following up on that. Thanks.
Sounds good.
All right, any other questions? Thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, council. Again, really appreciate your partnership and support and thoughtful questions today.
Thank you. That ends the Economic Development Committee, X-Bucks, and Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to the Parks and Public Works Committee. Can we accept the minutes? Let's get to it. Madam Clerk, ordinance on first reading. 8B, please.
An ordinance closing and abandoning the unopened right-of-way in the 300 block of Ann Street as detailed on the attached maps.
I see no hands. C, please.
An ordinance closing and abandoning the unopened right-of-way in the 7400 block of Sonia Lane as detailed on the attached maps subject to certain conditions.
I see no hands. 9, T, and U, please.
Item T, a resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number R22014201 Summit of Softball Concession Stands Ventilation to J. Brennan Construction, Inc. of Rocky Face, Georgia, in the amount of $377,285.93 with a contingency in the amount of $18,864.30 for a total amount of $396,150.23. Item U, a resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to award contract number D24004201 Economic Development Office Improvements to Bulk Builders LLC of Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, in the amount of $61,081 with a contingency in the amount of $6,100 for a total amount of $67,181.
V, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the wastewater department to extend and increase blanket contract number W20010201 paving and concrete repair or replacement with TNT Concrete LLC of Calhoun, Tennessee for an additional 3 months, and to increase the contract amount from $2.5 million to $3.1 million, representing a total increase of $600,000.
Thank you. 9C, please.
A resolution accepting the qualifications for the on-call blanket contracts for resident project representative services, RPR, contract number E20011401, for 1-year blanket contracts with 4 additional 1-year renewable options with 1 Barge Design Solutions, 2 CTI Engineering, Inc., 3 Consort Engineers, LLC, 4 D. Martin and Partners, LLC, 5 Labella Associates, PC, 6 LJA Engineering, Inc., 7 Reagan Smith Associates, Inc., 8 Romo Kepper Call, LLP, 9 Southern Environmental Technologies, Inc., 10 Thompson Engineering, and 11 Volkart, Inc. in the services categories. Applied for professional services estimated at $2,250,000 annually.
I see no hands. This concludes Parks and Public Works Committee. I want to thank Jeremy, Public Works. I want to thank all the guys, Parks and Outdoors. You guys doing an outstanding job. Appreciate it. Now we have Planning and Zoning.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our January 7th Planning and Zoning meeting. We'll accept the motion on the minutes. Minutes will stand without objection. Thank you. Karen, we have a few items today, but first of all, let me also say, Jeremy, thank you for Public Works. You guys have been, and gals have been outstanding in response to district needs, and everyone in District 4 says thank you. Yep, you got it. So on that, Karen, we have 5 items that had opposition at Planning Commission, and we do have a special note, I believe, from the city attorney as far as language use of alternative version as we transition over still from the old code to the new code, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the items on today, or that we'll be discussing today were heard at Planning Commission in December. So those applications were received in October, where we were still working through the zoning map. So even in December, when Planning Commission acted on those, we're still using the from zone was still the old zone. So the R1 zone was popping up on the agenda when we realized, well, you know, the new zones have been effective for several weeks now. So we requested that the agenda captions be changed to show the updated zoning. So the 2 zone on all the captions are the accurate new zone. It's just the from zone was not updated. And so that is during this transition period. And you'll notice in the presentation, I did try to update it, but the maps are the older maps that show the older zoning. But by next month, we will have adjusted all that.
Very good. I wanted to say that before we continued any further. So if you would allow me to pause real quickly, resolutions planning, item Y. Madam Clerk, will you just go ahead and read that?
Resolution authorizing the city to apply for and, if awarded, accept an environmental protection agency, EPA, reducing diesel. Item Y, a resolution authorizing the city to apply for and, if awarded, accept an environmental protection agency, EPA, reducing diesel emissions for a healthier Tennessee, RDE 4HT grant administered by the East Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalition, ETCFC, on behalf of the Tennessee Department of Environmental and Conservation, TDEC, and is allocated under the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, DERA, for an amount not to exceed $255,000 with a cost share not to exceed $1,320,000.
Thank you. I am seeing no questions on this item.
Mr. Chair, just take the opportunity to say that Eric Schmidt was the long-serving Director of Sustainability with the city, and as a couple weeks ago, he transitioned to a new job with the state. So we do still have two strong staff members in sustainability, but just to let you know, since he was with the city for quite a while, that he has moved to a new role.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. If we will move into our ordinances on first reading for next week, we have item 0202, which had opposition at Planning Commission. I believe that would be our first case.
That's correct.
Today.
So we had 5 cases with opposition. One was in Chairman Ledford's district, and I think he's got that one. So we'll just cover the 4 cases unless there's any questions. The first case is Normal Avenue. This is in North Chattanooga. The request is to rezone from RN15 to TRN1. And so just RN15, as you know, R1 got split into several zones. RN15 is the urban overlay zone. The request is for the rezoning is to construct a single-unit detached dwelling. So the property is zoned RN1, as is the surrounding abutting property. There's no recent zoning history for the site, so this is slightly unusual. We have Board of Zoning Appeals history instead. So there have been 3 Board of Zoning Appeals cases for this property, 2019, 22, and 24. They were all seeking reductions in setback, and usual lot shape was identified as the hardship in all the cases, and all 3 variance requests were denied. So the zoning application, the zoning narrative didn't specifically state that the reason for the rezoning is because of the denial for the series of denial for the variances, but that appeared to be the reason. And the applicant for the zoning case was the same applicant for the variance that was denied in 2024. So surrounding land uses are single-unit residences and vacant lots. The requested TRN1 zone is more of a urban residential zone. It permits higher density and multi-unit residential dwellings, which is not compatible. And there's no land use plan for the area to provide guidance on introducing a multi-unit residential zone at this location. Just showing the site plan here, you can see the kind of triangular shape of the lot, and it is smaller. Let me see if I have that size of the lot. The size of the lot is 0.09 acres. So I don't have the square footage of that. I'm sorry, I'll have that for the next meeting. So staff recommended denial of the rezoning and encouraged staff to apply for a new setback variance under the new RN15 zone standards. Gave a recommendation of maybe closing the alley, seeking an administrative modification, or both. So looking again, maybe not the rezoning, trying the variance route again under the new zone with a couple suggestions. There was opposition present at the meeting, more just the viability of developing single-family housing on the lot. Planning Commission determined that the rezoning would be appropriate as the Board of Zoning Appeals has denied previous requests for setback variance on the property, and the request for a single-family home is compatible with the development form and adjacent land uses. So Planning Commission's recommending approval with single-family detached unit only on the site.
Very good. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. I've had significant community feedback in opposition to this case. Can we take a look at the footprint as drawn in the application, please? So I can't read the numbers on this. I'm wondering, Karen, what the estimated square footage of that footprint is?
I was looking to see if we have it in the staff report. We don't have that. We did the proposed new equivalent zone. We talked about the front setback is 15 feet or average, the side and the rear, but I think it is primarily the rear setback, which is the problem. So staff recommended recommended pursuing closure of the alley to the rear. But this was discussed in detail with the applicant at Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission chair normally does not make motions, but felt strongly with the lack of action to be able to build on a small triangular shaped lot by the Board of Zoning Appeals, that rezoning with a condition was appropriate at this time.
When I looked at the original application, it seemed like that footprint was about 1,000 square foot footprint. If someone were to build a smaller home with a smaller footprint, setbacks would be different, or setback concerns would be different, would they not?
That's correct. There is a building envelope that does allow for something to be built there, and the applicant could speak a little bit better to their reasoning for the need.
Okay. And RN, let's see, TRN1, as you said, is for more, it's intended to be for a slightly more dense environment. We've got, along this street, we have pretty standard setbacks. This is not a street that's got a snaggletooth set of zoning standards.
That's correct.
Probably the R2 has been a pretty historic R2 would be my guess, and may very well even have already been transitioned to a single-family home. Okay, thank you for this presentation. It's helpful. It gives me a lot to think about, and I'll be talking with the applicant.
And for next week's meeting, I'll have the numbers for what's shown on the site plan in the building envelope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Any further questions, comments on case 0202? Okay, Karen, 0208, also in District 2.
That's right. This is just to the east on Tremont Street, a request to rezone from the ERA2 Urban Edge Residential Attached Zone to the ERM3 Urban Edge Multi-Unit Attached Zone. Those, of course, are form-based code zones. The proposed use is an 18-unit residential development. The site was zoned at the form-based code, the ERA2, when the original form-based code was adopted in 2016. I believe it was C7 prior to that. Just bring to your attention that across the street in 2023, a case was rezoned to ERM3 for a 15-unit apartment building. So this is an extension of that zone just across Tremont Street. Just to help it orient, this is the prior church site. And then you'll see, because the staff report speaks to that, you'll see the hill rising behind the building, and that's addressed with some recommendations. So the North Shore Plan recommends a medium intensity mixed use, and the plan notes that this form can be located adjacent to low density residential uses. Staff found the request is compatible with adopted plan, adjacent land uses and development form, because it's been brought up several times in development on Tremont Street. And it's also in the plan. Staff recommended that development be considered of the topography of the site to ensure compatibility with adjacent development form and protect steep slopes in the area, and just encourage the applicant work with LDO. There was opposition present, primarily seemed to be asking questions about the project and getting a better understanding. And staff is recommending approval of the ERM3 Urban Edge Multi-Unit Residential Zone at this location.
The developer is going to be having a community meeting on Thursday. I believe it's at 5:30 at Stone Cup.
July for me, let's get that on record.
I'm sorry. The developer, I believe, is going to be having a meeting. They've coordinated with the North Chattanooga Neighborhood Association at 5:30 at Stone Cup on Thursday. I'm not sure that I'll be able to attend that. I'm like triple booked on Thursday, but I think that they're having good conversations about placement of dumpsters, et cetera. Question that I have about this zone, I'd like to get clarity on whether it allows guest houses and hotels.
Okay.
Because we've made some conditions around that. This area is replete with short-term vacation rentals, and neighbors have been very clear that they would like to preserve housing for long-term residents.
I'll send that information and be prepared for that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Karen, moving forward, 0199 was a case in District 4 that did have a comment about traffic, but I am not needing a presentation on that at this time. So can we move into 0196 in District 5?
This was a case where I think that there was a request for information too, but this is it. And excuse me, the caption should read, the updated zoning would be a rezoning from RN3 residential neighborhood zone and CC commercial corridor zone to the CC commercial corridor zone. And CC commercial corridor is very similar to the old C2, or it was the equivalent zone. And the request was to add a showroom to an existing office retail building. The property fronts abuts the Highway 58 right-of-way, just east of the Highway 153 interchange, just to help you orient. So there is a large portion of the building where they currently operating is in the red. That's the current CC. They're rezoning that. And the brown, which is the R4, which went to an RN3, just because it will come up. Wilkesview Drive is to the eastern part of the project, and that was a concern for opposition. There's no recent zoning history at the site. You see that site plan is showing that extension of the building. That's the showroom heading east toward Wilkesview Drive. Staff found that the request with conditions, staff did recommend a condition, is compatible with adopted land use plans, adjacent land uses and development form. It's an extension of an existing zone. And so staff recommended conditions about no curb cuts onto Wilkesview Drive, that's still orienting that commercial traffic towards where it currently is located, and accessory uses such as drive-through facilities and outdoor storage, that is prohibited. That was not requested by the applicant, and that used to be a condition quite a bit, but just a note that because it is adjacent to residential, that's a prohibited use. So there was opposition present, concerns about drainage, and then also concerns about commercial access onto Wilkesview. That recommended condition was carried over by Planning Commission, so this comes with a recommendation to approve with no curb cuts, and accessory uses identified in that use matrix table are prohibited.
Very good. Councilman Hester, this is in your district, sir. You have the floor.
I did speak to the community regarding this, but I didn't know there was opposition according to the community leaders over there. So I guess we'll revisit this.
And I can send you the name and the address of the person, just so you'll be able to locate them. But they were concerned, my memory is that they were located on Wilkesview, adjacent to the site, and were just concerned about commercial traffic starting to come down Wilkesview into their residential area, but that was addressed in part through that condition. But I will send that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Hester. Moving into District 9, 0192.
I have case 207, is that correct, or am I missing one?
I have
Oh, no, excuse me, I'm sorry, yes.
2024-0192
Yes, thank you.
in my list.
Yes, this is on Glass Street. Request to rezone from RN15 residential zone to the CTMU transitional mixed-use commercial zone for a mixed-use. And this, a lot of time has spent at Planning Commission determining what exactly the proposed use was at this location. There's no recent zoning history at the site. It's primarily RN15 residential around the site. The RTZ was just to the east, which I don't have in my mind that equivalent zone for that. That was rezoned in 2021. to allow townhomes to be developed, but that has currently not been developed. So the request is for a mixed-use zone, primarily residential area. This part of Glass Street's about 2 blocks west of Campbell Street and the Ridge, and the site is primarily surrounded by single-unit residential. Staff found the request is not compatible with the plan. Adjacent land use is in urban form, and because the development of the area is largely urban residential, that CTMU zone allows a larger building and it introduces that mixed-use commercial component. Since we're working on the comprehensive plan update for the city, staff recommended, maybe waiting and seeing what that updated plan says, but this comes with a staff recommendation to deny. There was opposition present at Planning Commission, concerns about parking and the commercial aspect on the site. The Planning Commission determined that the rezoning, after speaking with the applicant and understanding the proposed use, that the request was compatible with the plan and recommends approval.
Very good. Councilwoman Coonrod, this is in your district. To add to the conversation, and I do see some members of the group that were in opposition at Planning Commission here tonight, there was quite a bit of discussion on the use of the property, and I think once that use was clarified, it tended to steer the conversation into a different direction.
Yes, Planning Commission had asked, this case was actually heard originally in November. Planning Commission recommended the applicant go back, make sure understood the use and the zoning requirements, and then came back in December and clarified a little bit more of the kind of the scale of the proposed use, which was, I guess, Planning Commission felt pretty low impact for this site.
Okay, no questions. Very good. All right. Let me make a note on case 2024-0201. There has been a new site plan that has been sent and attached to this. I will make that note for the city attorney.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Please also allow me to note there were no items in District 6 to report. I would have been obviously honored to have oversaw those, given the circumstances. Karen, do you have any other comments for, I see Madam Councilwoman Dotley. She used to be our chair.
Thank you so much, Chairman.
So hang on one second, Karen.
Yes, I just had a question about item, I'm still catching up, 2024-0195. I don't need a presentation, just what are the conditions they want to lift?
Yes, let me get to the. Oh, so this is a Riverfront Parkway. They had a condition from their zoning from a while ago that said, and this is the old emissions testing station, and it was limiting the number of curb cuts. And so they wanted to amend it. Staff and Planning Commission said, you might as well just lift it and let it be handled through permitting. So it comes with approval to lift the condition, but I think it's limiting to curb cuts. Let me get to that. There's some very specific language, but in working with Public Works Transportation, it was felt that just lifting the language altogether and handling it as permitting like normally would be done was the best approach.
Okay.
But let's see if I can.
That's fine. Could you send it to me when you get out?
I sure will,
Okay.
yes.
That works for me. Thank you so much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Noel, I see your light.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Item K.
Item K.
Yes. I don't think I spoke with anyone in reference to this.
Well, Stone Creek would be Mr. Alan Jones. I do not see Mr. Alan Jones in the audience.
I can follow up with Mr. Jones and ask him to contact you.
But I have a
Yes.
suspicion he will be contacting you very soon.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Council, any other items you would like to cover? Councilman Hester, that's my light, your light.
My light, 0193. Looks like the Planning Commission denied, it was denied by staff. Can you bring me to a better understanding?
The Bonnie Oaks Drive, yes. Staff recommended, I can go to that case. Staff recommended denial. Planning Commission recommended approval for that one. Get to the one. So this is a rezoning on Bonnie Oaks, and this is kind of between New York Avenue and South Chick Creek, kind of about halfway between those two. And the rezoning was for TRN3, and let me get to my notes so I don't just go off memory. So the property is currently zoned RN16, which is the older R1 zone outside the urban overlay. And they're proposing a mixed-use community that had townhomes, cottages, and multifamily, 78 units. The property is zoned the RN16 is most of the property around it. There is a little bit of neighborhood commercial zoning along Bonnie Oaks Drive. The proposed use, staff recommended denial because the proposed use introduces a mix of uses, a multi-unit particularly. It's not compatible with adopted land use plan. So the primary use in the plan is single-family residential. Then it has kind of criteria where you would introduce attached housing as a secondary use. It didn't meet any of those criteria. That would normally be on the corner, similar to such a use. There's a whole rundown, talks about, is it on a major street? This didn't qualify for that. Is it redevelopment of an existing site? So staff recommended denial, primarily because the plan doesn't talk about introducing those uses, does not support introducing those uses at this location. There was no opposition present. Planning Commission is, I'll say overall, interested in housing and in making sure that, that housing is appropriately I guess, supported. And so Planning Commission determined that this is compatible based on the discussion at Planning Commission and recommends approving the zone, but there was no one present in opposition.
Thank you, Karen.
Councilman, are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, can I just want to make one
Yes,
comment?
of
I think
course.
it's important to bring up. There's 78 units. It's a relatively large site, around 11 acres. So the density is 7 dwelling units an acre. It is relatively low density for that mix of use.
Thank you, Karen. Council, any other cases you would like for us to review this afternoon? I'm not seeing any lights. Chairman, we need about 15 minutes per the city attorney. If you'd like, I will adjourn us or put us in recess until 6:15. All right, thank you. We are in recess.